Okay, today we're going to hash over relationships. The reason we're touching on relationships is there's been a lot of talk, especially starting a new year, 2025. People tend to get into programs, whether it be for health or changes they want to make in their life.
Yep.
And that generally falls under abundance, which is one of our top 4. And relationships falls underneath. And it sounds like a strange place to put it. And I'd go as far as to say is that relationships fall within all 4.
Yeah.
There's aspects where your partner will appreciate a good body and nutrition program. There's aspects where your partner is going to appreciate your mindset and how you deal with them.
Yeah.
Spirituality will always fall into relationships because there's a spiritual aspect between the divine masculine and the divine feminine.
Yeah.
But today we're going to focus from an abundance standpoint. Mm-hmm. So abundance is a concept that a lot of people struggle to gain because they want to box it in. So abundance is I have a big amount of money in my bank account. Mm-hmm. For me, if you want to see a measurement of abundance, right? There's the old saying of the father that wakes up with his children lying next to him and his wife lying next to him. Mm-hmm. To me, that's the wealthiest someone could be. So from an abundance standpoint, having family and someone who loves you around you, expressing that love to you, that you're able to interact with on a daily basis, I think is the highest form of abundance.
Yeah. I think the way I process that is being thankful for the things that you do have versus the things that you don't have.
Yes.
Like that's kind of what I think about when I hear you say that, where I'm in the world that we're in, we constantly are, in a place of, we're chasing something.
Yeah.
Like we're always after the next dollar or the vehicle, the house, the cars, paying off a debt, or there's always some kind of big target we have that we place on things. And I think and I've been guilty of this for a long time. Like you kind of forget like what you actually have. Yeah. And being thankful for that.
True, and it falls into the lack mindset, right? So if you're abundant and you're living in abundance, and abundance says that you realize what you have in your life, mm-hmm. right? You sit down and you go, you know what, I have a great life. I have some people who love me. I have children. I have a wife. I have things around me that make me abundant. And you got to look at it from a day standpoint. You're not going, I'm going to be abundant tomorrow or have wealth. It's not about tomorrow or yesterday. It's about right now. Do you have food in your stomach? Do you have a roof over your head? Do you have someone at home who loves you and is working with you? Do you have kids that you are teaching and raising and becoming the next evolution of human beings?
Right.
And that makes you abundant immediately. That also doesn't mean that you don't push for more.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you're not trying to make your life more abundant, but it means that at any single point is you don't have a lack mindset. You don't walk into something going, I don't have, right? Because there's, you can go.
Because you do have.
You do have, right? And you can flip this over and you can say, well, compare yourself to someone in a poor African country. Mm-hmm. It's also not that, because someone in a poor African country could be more abundant than you are from their mindset standpoint.
Right.
And when we dive into relationships, right, I often think, especially, it's 2025. What must it be like? And we've got friends of ours who are single in the dating scene who are younger, right? Mm-hmm. And I often sit and think of the absolute shit show that the dating world is now, because everything's online. You got all these apps, Tinder, and all these apps that people hop onto, right? Which is how you connect now with people, right? And in that comes its own derangement syndrome, I'd like to call it, because the concept of it is to, when we've spoken with, I've spoken with Carmen, who trains with us on Saturdays, and, he says, like, finding a girl is easy. Finding someone to spend the night with or spend the day with or have an evening with is easy. Flip through the app, on the one you like, they connect with you, great, let's meet up. But what I often find, and again, this is not, we're married, so from us, this is just the experience of what I hear from people, what I see out there, is that the problem is finding that valuable connection of someone that I can actually go, I can spend my life with this person.
Right.
And, again, we're going to be talking specifically to what we see online, but what I often see is I see young girls with incredibly unrealistic standards, right? And I see young men with the same thing, where young women are saying, the bare minimums, 6 foot tall, six-figure salary, the triple six, right? Which again already kind of indicates a devil mentality on that, right? The triple six. 6 foot tall, six-figure salary, six-pack abs, right?
Yep.
And you're like, okay, but do you realize how rare that is?
Yeah.
This, you know, like
it's like less than 1%.
Wouldn't you want to find just a good guy who's willing to work his ass off with you so you can create an abundant life together? Aren't you looking for someone who values you as a woman and loves you and wants you? Like, what you're doing is what you're looking for is so superficial.
Yeah.
You know, how is it going to feed you?
I think the internet really screws up perceptions of reality a lot.
That's true.
And I think that's a struggle that I've experienced personally and firsthand in marriage. Like, you know, we both got, like, husband and wife, man and woman, go into a marriage with expectations, and then reality sinks in.
Yep.
Like, and I don't think anybody really knows what the expectation is supposed to be. I think you just go based on what you perceive, you know, whether it was what you saw in your parents, whether it was just the other married couples that you expect. And so, like, I couldn't even imagine, like, what it's like to date in 2025. Like, I'm like thinking about those that, like, again, you're on the internet and you see, like, all the quote, like, good things, if you will, and the glamour, but is there any real substance to the people that you're actually connecting with and trying to meet someone that's actually of, you know, similar standards, views, and perspectives on life? And I understand what, like, I've heard that too about the triple sixes. You know, I think, like, I don't know, we're pretty capable, competent dudes. And I think there's more to it than just, like, what they look like, what they make. You know, there's more. We know this to be true, but I think, like, the whole reason of this podcast is that we're out here trying to be better ourselves. Like, we're trying to grow and develop and evolve. And we've lived a lot of life. We've had a lot of life experiences to be able to put us in a position to do this. And we both talked about how, like, this didn't just all of a sudden happen. We came up with a good idea over lunch. This has been some time in the making for both of us on our separate journeys. And then we finally come together. And I think relationships are like that, where, you know, especially, I think back to the early days when we were dating, when you meet the right person is really easy, like, you know, in the beginning. And then once, you know, you start getting into long-term relationships, it's challenging. But I think it's hard for people to understand, like, okay, who is it that I'm after? And I think, you know, whether it's a man or a woman, like, identify, like, some of your non-negotiables, like, identify, like, you know, what are some things I'm truly looking for in a man? What are the things I'm looking for in a woman?
I think the convolution in that is, and you made a good point, is internet has changed the dynamic of how people meet. You know, before the advent of the internet, and I'd say it really exploded probably circa 2012, 2011. Before then, there was the internet. You know,
I have a good friend that met his wife through AOL Instant Messenger. Do you remember AOL Instant Messenger?
Yeah. My point again is, the first time I spoke to my wife was on Facebook.
There you go.
You know, back in 2008. But the difference being then is, right, I wasn't looking for her on a dating app, and that was a introduction which still led to a in-depth understanding and learning to know who each other is. You know, it started with phone calls. It started with dates. And I find what's happened is there's nothing wrong with that. It's the advent of networking, right? So there is a good aspect of the internet where it allows people to network on a wider base. But what I think's happened since then is it's gone past that, and now it's okay. So this is what I present online, right? Where, as you said, AOL. Well, then what happened was this just got us connected, and then what happened is then we took the natural steps of meeting each other, getting to know each other. What I've read in studies is the advent since 2012, when the internet and social media really started exploding. Right. Facebook's only been around since 2007. Right. So it took a couple of years for it to become kind of the thing, and then all of a sudden, all these other platforms popped up, and then they became the base method, and then we had the advent of apps popping up, which provided these. Now you always had websites that you could go through and dating options. Dating
websites,
but they were old school. What Tinder pretty much did is it created a scroll effect, which is the same as social media. I just scroll randomly through until I see something I like and I click on it. And it's that 3-second rule. And what happens is it's a superficial way of meeting. And then we connect. But then the connection became less about getting to know each other and more about one-night stands and kind of getting in and out. And, you know, and I wouldn't want to say that's everybody on there. I'm sure there's people who have great experiences using it as a networking tool. But I think it's become convoluted with the advent of people that are on there for pure purposes. I want to meet someone versus people who just want to fool around.
Well, my perspective too, and I'm not talking to young people right now when I say this, but like, people our age, even older, maybe even, let's call it mid-20s to 30s. But like, to me, these people that are single, there's a reason behind that.
Yeah.
And some outside of your control, it is what it is. Like, I'm not sitting here throwing any like hate towards anybody that is single. I just look at it as we all have like past and issues and traumas and history of things, right? And so, like, to me, when it comes to that, and you're sitting there on your scrolling Tinder or whatever it is that you're on, there's a reason you're doing it that way.
Instant gratification is the word.
And to me, is there any real substance to the individual in that scenario? Like, there is, but you just have to get to it.
But and I think that's the point, all right? So I think it's the mechanism you use to get to the person that kind of creates blocks on its own. Because if I'm scrolling in there, it's first of all the instant gratification. I find someone I like them, we click, we connect, we chat a little bit, we meet. And then it's it could be the excitement, because what they've essentially done, they've gamified dating. Right, it's gamified. Yeah. It's like running Russian roulette, right? It's like,
I don't blame people for it, because it is a much more efficient way to go about it.
Again, that's not a judgment, right? It's a trying to get a better understanding, because the world moved through the fast-paced internet, and what happens is it's always the overcorrection. Yeah. It's the natural overcorrection when technology comes in. Yeah. Right. Television came in in the 50s, and it was going to destroy society. And then you have a problem of people who sat and watched a lot of TV, right? And then it started to equalize, right? Because and I'm seeing that same equalization with social media. As much as kids are on social media a lot, and it's not just kids, adults are also on social media. Right. The average time spent on a social media like Instagram is 3.5 hours a day. That's the average in the United States, right? But besides that,
that's almost half somebody's work day.
That is, right? And there are benefits to social media. There's great things to see, but it is also, it sucks time. And I think those dating apps kind of do the same thing, right? You're scrolling through an instant gratification, and I think there's a reward center in our brain, which is the same reward center we get when we scroll on social media.
Well, even just notifications on a phone is like, there's a dopamine hit that is a result of that, and there's even proof or studies that have shown that it's an addiction. And
it's addiction because it's the natural invent of feeling important because someone's contacting you.
Right.
And now what happens is it's overwhelming. You have email, you have text, you have WhatsApp, you have all these things that just constantly throwing you notifications that someone's interested.
But we all want to know that we're liked and loved and feel good about ourselves. And I think social media has a tendency to really pump it up in that regard, 100%. And it's hard for people to compete with us. And when you and I talked about a video not that long ago where men have a really hard time competing. Like, if you have an attractive wife and she posts a video or a picture of herself, this is what the lady was saying in the video. If she posts a bikini picture of herself, and you get these like however many likes and hearts and comments, whatever that comes with that, how does a husband compete with that?
How do you compete with the admiration? Well, the thing is, the first answer to that is you shouldn't be competing with it, because it's real life versus something that is virtual, right?
Agreed.
And it's the same thing on the dating apps, because what's happening is, because it's got the virtual gamified, there's a reward system. I find someone to click, they reply back, we meet, and I want to get to the next one, right? But you're not actually spending enough time on that person. It's there's a very interesting study which talks about the effect of media, right? And what I'm talking about entertainment media. So let's narrow it down to film. Right. So what's happening is there is a new film released, I think 4 a day. Wow. Right. If globally, 4 a day. And what happens is they're released so quickly. Now, I remember back when Blockbuster was still a thing, right? Yeah. And if a movie was released, there was almost a year worth of hype. Trailers kind of go, and then
couldn't wait for that movie to come out so you could rent it or
it wasn't that accessible, right? So it's not like you just go get it. You had to wait for it, and then you'd either go see it at the cinema, and then it would be like a 3 to 6 month process before it comes out on DVD or
you could
disc.
rent it first, but then you had to wait to buy it.
So there was a process. Which what it did for us is, when the movie came, there was an anticipation, there was a time frame, and there was a break. And when the movie came, you would sit back and you would be completely drawn in by that film and appreciate it for what it was, which is an artistic expression.
Right.
And what I find now is that I'm talking about personal anecdotal experience, right? I love films. It's one of the things that I really enjoy, sitting down and looking at a good film, analyzing how they put it together. Good movies are made. And the last couple of years, I found myself questioning the validity or the quality of film. Right? Like, they're not making films the same. Now, there is something to be said for comedy films are not done the same. That's part of woke culture that came in where, anything funny is offensive, so funny isn't good anymore. That's starting to make a comeback. Comedians, thank God for guys like Joe Rogan and Dave Chappelle, because they're bringing it back. So I'm hoping you're going to see those films come back in, right?
Well, but another thought that comes in my head is like seasons of TV shows. I remember watching TV shows on the actual network that it was played on, and you had to wait week to week for that new show to come out. Now they're releasing seasons at a time.
And that falls down in the same category. So now I found myself watching a film. Now, what the film comes on, I can get it on HBO Max. I can, there's literally 10 streaming services. I don't really like going to the cinema. I like waiting for it to enjoy it at home. Right? But now what happens is it's on. I'm preoccupied. I have my phone. And this is going on, and then I don't really pay attention to the movie. When they get to the end of the movie, I've missed half the story, and I'm like, it movie sucked. And what I've been trying to do the last while is put my phone down, and when I'm engaged in something, try and be engaged. And I'd go back to that same movie that I thought was horrible, and I'd rewatch it and go, oh my God, this is a masterpiece.
Yeah, nice.
But because there's so much constantly flooding us in movies, forget the other distractions, being on your whatever else, just the fact that there's so much, you do not actually appreciate what is out there. It's not to say every film is a masterpiece, but there's a couple of masterpieces in between there where I'll go back and go, oh my God, that is brilliant.
Yeah, I get that.
And how that relates back to the dating app is the same thing. As you're so inundated, right? You have so many options, so many things going, that you don't stop when you find an option you like, and you don't actually take the time to run through the process of, do I really like this?
Right.
And we're talking about the problem, and I'd like to focus on the solution, right? My solution for that would be, if you are on Tinder, right, and you are going through somebody and you find that person that you engage with, try and engage in-depthly. Like, try and have an in-depth conversation with them. If I can't manage it, like you said, have a couple of non-negotiables. Run through them to see if, kind of run that elimination phase so you can see it. But don't rely solely on that. Get to know the human being.
Yeah, and I would add, like, have an inquiring mind, which is essentially what you're saying, but just ask all kinds of questions, find out who that person is and really get in depth with the individual, because I mean, in a 1 to 2 year period of you're quote dating somebody to get married, that's not a lot of time in the grand scheme of life. And to really truly know who the person is, you're not gonna know who these people are, and you will to a certain degree, but you're also going to evolve and change over time.
Yes.
And you and I have been with our wives for a similar amount of time. You go through a lot of life experiences, those things change and shape you. Your past childhood stuff comes to the present, and you can ask all the in-depth inquisitive questions that you want to ask. You're not possibly going to get to the bottom of everything,
but again, like you say, have an inquiring mind, try and engage. And I think if you can, and I would recommend this for anybody, if you're going to date, I had a good friend of mine from Canada. He's staunchly Christian, and he found the love of his life, who he's just had a child with, right? And he found her on a Christian dating app, right? Because he found someone who has the same moral standing as him. So Tinder is a smorgasbord, right? You don't know what you're getting, right? Here you understand that I am this person, and I'm trying to find someone with that same type of mindset. If you're someone that trains a lot, speak to people in the gym. I know the gym has kind of become a hellscape, but it's not that bad, to be honest. Just don't be a creep, be friendly, read cues, but speak to people, right? If you have a local church group, go to church, right? If you have local friends, speak to people. What will happen is you generally find that within those groups, people know, it's the same as networking for business. I've always
suggested that to folks that I've known in my life that are single, that are looking to get involved, exactly like you said. Find local organizations, networking groups, even if it's business networking groups, you just never know. Same thing. Coming across a group of people, and somebody will connect you with somebody.
Yeah, and then that's a good way to try and really find people that are in your realm, right? That are in the same mindset as you. Because what we find now is you're starting to see that there's been an ideological shift the last while, right? Is when I was dating, is no one cared if you were conservative or not conservative. This is do we have a similar viewpoint on the world? And we there's a whole bunch of things we don't agree on. There's a whole bunch of things I don't agree with my wife on, right? But we agree enough that we love each other enough that we be able to overcome these. And I think it's important for people to set those stands for themselves and say, listen, just get to know the human being. Again, we spoke about this we talk about this in business, right? It's like making the sale. Don't go into dating expecting to find the love of your life on a date, because if you do that, you probably won't, because you're putting so much pressure on yourself that you're probably going to go into it and say, I am going to get to engage with another human being. I'm going to put no judgment on them. I'm going to get to know them, and we'll see where it goes from there. And worst case scenario, I have a nice conversation. Best case scenario, I might find the person I'll spend the rest of my life with.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you go into it with that without any expectation, you're probably just going to have a good time.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best advice I can give from someone who is married. So again,
I don't know why this triggers a memory of a story of a guy I knew that was single looking. We were out, a group of us. I was married, so I wasn't on the market. Not to say that I'm like the best, like I didn't necessarily have the best track record in the dating world when I was on it. Anyways, this guy was looking at a girl in the place we were at, and he's like, man, she's gorgeous, and she's out of my league, would never give me the time of day or whatever. I was like, how do you know? And he's like, well, look at her, she's hot. She's very attractive. I was like, and this is my advice to any person that's on the dating scene, especially guys, like have a little fear of asking somebody out. Like, I looked at him, I was like, dude, I hear you, I get it, she's good looking. I was like, and you think she's gonna turn you down? I was like, but what if she says yes?
You can't strike out if you don't take a swing, buddy.
Yeah, and he's just like, oh, she'll never say yes. I was like, yeah, but you'll never know if you never ask.
Yeah.
You have to take that shot, because guess what? She's just like anybody else. Yeah, she's good looking. She's a beautiful woman, probably the most attractive in the room. But you don't know. Maybe nobody ever approaches her. And you're the one guy who decided to do it that day. And the fact that you had the confidence to do it, she decided, I'm going to say yes.
Yeah, unless you try, you ain't going to know. And the thing I like about that,
they turn you down, they turn you down.
And that is a problem with men as old as humankind, is the confidence in that. But
for sure,
I want to move on from that, right? And let's start talking about marriage in 2025, because the marriage world, I wouldn't say it's changed. I mean, the construct of what marriage represents, if it ever changes, there'll be a problem, right? But again, our society has evolved, right, in some good ways, in some terrible ways. It's always an evolving. It's the pendulum swing, as we always talk about, the undercorrection, the overcorrections, and society's role, how we perceive husband and wife, right, man and woman, masculine, feminine, has slightly changed. And I see a change that's going in, especially with the new administration coming in, where we're trying to get back to the nuclear family, right? But without falling back into the same traps. Right? Whereby, the woman has a specific role within the household, the man has a specific role, it's a masculine and feminine role. They enact those roles, but they enact those roles as equals. And then what they try and do is they try and uplift and understand each other. And there's been a lot of movement, right, with divine masculine, divine feminine, especially in trying to create an emotional safe space. You could be someone who creates a wonderful safe space for your wife physically, right? She's well taken care of, there's money in the bank, she doesn't want for anything, everything's there, but you come home and you enact your rage of whatever's bothering you and you scream and shout. Or she comes to you with the way that women emote, which is emotionally. And because you don't want to understand those emotions, or because they make men feel awkward, which they do, right? You don't create a safe space for your partner, and you immediately go into a defense mode and tell them, nah, those feelings don't make sense, or they don't matter. And it's not that every feeling should make sense or should matter to you, but it matters to her.
Yeah.
So I have found it a reasonably enlightening as well as difficult path of figuring out how to create said emotional space, because I think it's important that men and women understand that when a man he doesn't require a safe emotional space, right? Because he doesn't emote the same way women do. So let's take two scenarios here. You have the wife who needs to express something, a difficult conversation emotionally with her husband. You need to meet her where she is. You need to understand that this is emotional. She's not asking you to sort out or figure out her problems for her. She needs you to listen. She needs you to meet her on the same level emotionally, right? Which is great. It's men I fail at this consistently. I keep trying to understand it because I'm not built that way. Neither are you.
Not at all.
That's the fundamental difference between men and women. But it is important for me to try and meet her where she is, try and understand that so that I can try and move forward.
Yeah.
And move forward in a way that she has the emotional safe space.
A real quick side note to that. Well, it's not a side note, but it's on topic to that point. I was listening to some influencers that I listened to and their podcast. The wife was saying she had a moment where, and they've been married for 25 years. She had a moment where he was traveling for work or something.
Yeah.
They have 5 kids together. Some crazy started to occur at home. When she called him, she's like, she told him from the get-go, I don't need you to fix it. I need you to listen, and I need you to receive me, basically, and I need you to be here for me. Flat told him this, because now, again, 25 years of this, because now he's a guy that's wired like us.
Yeah.
And so she tells him this up front because she's like, I know how he is. I know how he operates. I needed this from him, so I let him know what I needed.
So she met him where he was.
She met him where he was, right?
That's a good point.
Which is great, but to your point of what you're saying is like, as men, a lot of times, especially early on in marriage, and I've been horrible at meeting her where she is and understanding what she needs. I didn't know these things, and so what I would do is try to get it to stop. I would try to get her to shut up, try
fix
to fix it. I would mostly try to fix the problem. But not hear her or see her or meet her where she is, and that has wreaked havoc on us. You know,
and it's not just you, man. It's me, and it's every man who's trying to be better in his relationship.
You know how much I read. I got 30 books in there on marriage and relationships and sex. Like, it's not fucking easy, and there's lots of books written about it because of how hard it is and how everybody has these same problems.
And each book is going to give you insights, but you have to figure this out.
That's right.
Because each wife is different. Your wife is different to everyone else's. Your experiences are different. Your perspectives are different. So you've got to find that in. But I mean, the best way that I could explain it from a man's perspective is they're reaching out to you emotionally about something that really bugs them. Mm-hmm. When they tell you what bugs them, your logical brain is going to tell you it's not that bad. Mm-hmm. It can be fixed. Mm-hmm. It's fixable. They're not coming to you because it is fixable or can't be fixed. They're coming to you because they are emotional about it. Mm-hmm. That emotion is affecting their life and how they perceive themselves in that moment.
Right.
And they need you to be there for them emotionally so that they can connect with you. It's a connection phase point. It took me a long time to figure out, but it's a connection reach out.
Yeah.
In the same way, when you're a husband coming home, right, and this is for any woman listening, and I'm saying this as a man, and tell me your perspective on this. When I come home as a husband and I've had a bad day, what'll happen is I won't reach out emotionally because the last thing I want is emotions, right? Men don't operate. So I think it's very important to women to realize that as much as we can meet you and you have a safe space, that safe space exists for men, but you have to meet us where we are.
Yeah.
And generally what that means is, in the same aspect, I don't necessarily need you to solve my problem either. I've got to solve my problem. That's how a man operates. In the same breath, I don't need to tell you how I'm feeling about it. I'm already trying to figure that out for myself. What I need you to be is I need you to be my supportive wife. What I need you to walk in, see I've had a bad day, and give me a hug.
Yeah.
I need you to hold me. I want you sit me and go, how are you? My husband, how are you doing? What can I do for you? Do you need food? Just kind of our needs. It's the service of a wife that's going to make me feel like everything that I have gone and why I'm feeling this way is worthwhile.
Yeah, I think, like, again, 2025, talking about the way this society has evolved and changed, like, if you go back historical, like way back in the day, maybe 1800s or something, men would go out of the house and provide. They would literally kill animals and bring it back and worked really hard, whatever they had to do. And of course, fast forward through the times, the old school way is like exactly what you're saying. The husband comes home from a long, hard day and is received by the wife. And in my eyes, like, we're like men and women, we're wired a specific way. One of the ways that men are wired is we want to feel valued and appreciated for what we've done to provide. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel appreciated. It makes us feel respected. It makes us, most importantly, feel loved. Yeah. When, you know, I've seen cartoon pictures of it where, like, you got the old school woman in the big dress and the 3 kids waiting for the husband to come home and they meet him with a hug.
It's funny you mention that, right? Because that goes back to the 1950s nuclear family advent. What's interesting about that is what they got right? And this might be controversial and, people may not agree with it. What they got right is when that man got home, right? So the idea being is the man goes out and he has a hard day at work. He comes home, and I remember there's this 50s ad that kind of gives tips for a woman to tell her what to do. Like make sure you're presentable, your makeup's done nicely, the kids are cleaned and washed and ready for bed, supper is ready to eat. You greet him by the door with a kiss. You're in service to him. And here's the kicker, right? The problem with that outlay was it never had the flip side. Right. It never showed the emotional safe space for when the wife was going through the same thing and she needed the husband to be there. However, that is a very good representation of how we feel valued. Right. And when we've had a hard day, when we go and it's showing us that everything that we're pushing ourselves for is worth it, because that's why we're doing it. So it's an interesting analogy for me, and honestly, it just popped in now because that's essentially exactly what a man needs to feel like he's valued in the relationship. If he's had a bad day and even if he's had a good day, that's his safe space that a wife can create for him.
Well, the hard part though with this is that we've identified that's what a man needs, right? And wants. And of course, we want sex. Like we always want sex, and that makes us feel like sex makes us feel loved. Like it just does, right? But let's look at in today's world, and we live in Florida. Florida's become very expensive to live, right? And we know with what I do for a living on my day job is mortgages. The average home in the Tampa general area is at least a decent single family home is $350 to $400 at least
at the minimum.
So my point is, it's taking two incomes for a lot of homes. To buy, right? So husband and wife are both working. So reality is, and there was a lot of like remote works for a while, so you might have someone already in the house whenever you come home. But the reality is, like, you're getting home at 5:30, 6 o'clock after picking the kids up from daycare at 5. Yeah. After a long day, and you're meeting at home, and now it's like, and I have 3 kids. It's dinner, dishes, bath time. Yeah. It's 8:30.
There's no real time for anything, which it makes a good problem, because the average, when you look at the average American household, and let's focus on Florida because that's where we stay. Yeah, is you make a good point. Is you need a dual income, right, in order to be able to subsidize all this. Then when you add, it's very
rare now that there's not a dual income.
Yeah,
honestly.
Right? So you have a dual income, but generally what you'll find in the dual income is there's differences in the type of jobs that are done. And this is where it becomes a difficult thing to manage, right? Because you have two people who are both bringing in incomes, right? They're spending their day out. So the woman takes on a role, which in my honest opinion is a role that women can. I have no problem if women take it on. It's a great role to take on if you're a provider in the family, even if you're the sole provider. Like there's advent for it. If you can provide, good for you. When it's a dual coming in, it changes the dynamic of how each one receives loves, gets love, because it's put women in a more masculine role, right? And it's pulled men in a more feminine role. It's kind of reversed the way, which
I would say all men. Like I can tell you in my situation, I think what ends up happening, all right, you got man's in the masculine role, and then a woman has to step up, and she finds herself wanting to be in the feminine role, but has to be in a little bit of a masculine role. And then from my perspective, like, okay, I married this strong alpha type woman, but didn't know how to really treat that person, how to get her into her feminine whenever you have all these other things that are going on. And so I think a real struggle that a lot of men have is like, well, I want to treat her with respect. I want to treat her as an equal and as a partner in this situation, but I don't necessarily know how to go about it. So I'm going to meet energy with energy sometimes. And in my case,
I think that's all the time.
Yeah. And in my case, meeting energy with that same, like matching that energy with what was given, I was like, oh, so that's how I have to operate, which wasn't the case. Like, and we're talking in an argument situation, like you kind of realize, like, how do you diffuse it? And this conversation, this whole marriage thing, as we know, is a very complex, lengthy topic. Yeah. But I think the harsh reality of 2025 is that it takes some real intention to be able to like make it work. Both parties have to be intentional. If
both parties, and I mean, you can add complexity with children. You can add complexity with just the general challenges you have in life as they come, right? But a good point that you make there is, regardless of what you're doing, when you get home, there's a defined role for each of you, regardless, right? Yeah. So you're not spending the whole day at home. If you've got to take the kids to daycare, which is what most parents have to do, right? Either they're in school or they're in daycare. Right. So you go away from your home, and a lot of women have to switch into a masculine mindset for just to be in a job, right? Yeah. Because jobs by the largest degree, unless they're in the care industry, which is what women are really good at, which is why majority of them are nurses.
Right.
They're very good at giving people care. But if they're not in those divisions, they have to switch their mindsets into a more logical, analytical phase, which is a masculine phase.
Yeah.
So what happens is now they're in that. Now they're that the whole day. Now when they come home, do they bring that home or do they have to switch? Now, asking them to just switch it on and switch it off is super difficult.
Yeah, when we talk like emotional and sexual intimacy and connection, like one of the things I've really learned and still learning is like it's very difficult for a woman to go from career to mom to wife to lover.
Yes.
All in the same day,
because she's not designed to.
And for a man, we can go to lover like that, like
because we're designed to.
Because we're designed to,
we're
right?
Designed
so we
to.
have to figure out that navigation. And I want to make a quick side point to something too. We said, having lived this like for 8 years now, both of you work. You have, in our case, we have 3 kids. And I told you we pick up the kids between 4:30 and 5 o'clock from the daycare. We get home, and when I was in the corporate gig, I was getting home 6:30. You're having dinner. You're changing diapers, giving kids bath routines, getting them in bed. By that time, it's like 8:30. Mm-hmm. You're fucking exhausted because you're back up 5 o'clock the next morning, and it's very hard to make time for your relationship in those scenarios. And then it really does cause you to start to grow apart.
Yeah.
And if you're not intentional about finding ways to overcome that, it's really, really easy to grow apart.
100%. And it doesn't even take kids. It could be 2 career paths.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
It could be focused on one or the other, and you've got to be intentional about trying to find. Jordan Peterson always has these great relationship quirks, and he speaks specifically about the one relationship. You're going to spend some time together. It might be 5 minutes, might be an hour, might be 2 minutes. Doesn't really matter. Now, what's happening is, in this case, is you make a great point, is you're going from hyperdrive. You wake up, got to get the kids ready, got to get ready for work. We're both out the door. Now we're on the career path. For that day, we're focused on the job we have to do, right? Because this is how we bring our income in. We run through this. We deal with whatever life aspects happen. Maybe takes the husband, wife takes the husband, the husband takes the wife. Maybe a phone call in between. That's not really a connection time because you're just communicating on what are we doing with the day, right? Yeah. And then what happens is, at some point, you can leave work. You have to take care of the kids. They come first. However, in all of those interactions, right, you woke up together.
Yeah.
You got ready for work together. You probably, if you're lucky, I'm saying lucky because this happened already, you have breakfast together. You're then not going to be together with the day, but you are communicating. Mm-hmm. Then when you get back home, you're both getting back home, right? You have the kids to deal with, right? But you're generally dealing with them together. You're a team. Because if you're not a team, you're going to have a very difficult household.
Yeah, definitely.
Then once you get them through that process, you then go to the next phases. And like you say, you are exhausted, but you've also made a choice of this is the life that you want because you want kids, you want the married life. So it's also a choice you've made. And I think in all of those communicant phases, and we as men are very guilty of this, because if we do it, it's very easy for us to drive our wives into a masculine state.
Oh yeah,
right. Because what happens is we become silo focused, right? So we put ourselves in a silo because I've got to do it. I'm going to get it done, right? So what happens is I'm doing my task, my wife's doing it, but I'm doing it individual. I'm not really. We're a team, and I'm treating her as a team member, but I'm not treating her as a wife.
Yeah.
So it's very important that those times, Jordan Peterson says, those small periods of time that you have, that you really take them for what they are. So if you wake up next to your wife, kiss her hello.
Yes.
Or kiss her good morning, right? Yeah. Kiss your wife good morning. Ask her how she's doing. Even if it's 5 minutes you have, I know you got to get up, you got kids to go. Take that 5 minutes and put some effort into her.
Yeah.
Right. And she'll do the same for you. While you guys are getting ready be a husband and wife. Be that team.
I think when you get caught up in the whirlwind of life, you forget to show them that you're their priority, that you're important to them, especially for women. Like showing a woman that she's important to you is it really matters. It really does make a difference. And that's something like, and again, like I can tell you all the lessons of what not to do in marriage because I screwed up a lot. And for me, I think about my corporate time, and I don't ever want it to, like, I'm just sharing my reality, but like I sometimes had to be at work at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop until, I left at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. And then I would come home just again completely exhausted. But then I would let go and unwind because I was just so tired, so exhausted. And I was just like, my mental capacity was not very, very good. I got stressed very easily. And there's a lot of other stuff that played into this. But like, like I did not come home and realize like I had to be a husband and a father, and I didn't realize like that was probably a more important job than my actual day job.
Yes.
And so what would end up happening is like we hurt the ones that we love the most. And I think where I was in a struggle was like I knew this was going on. I knew that I was not being effective in marriage. I knew that I was not being effective as a father, but I didn't know how to fix it. And I think for me, what's been a journey, you know, again, I'll keep saying this for a long time, but 2024 for me wasn't my best year, but I needed that year. And what it showed me was like essentially how to attack some of these problems that I've been faced with for many, many years. And it's simply like, you've got like, if you want a marriage to work, a relationship to work, you've got to recognize like you're the problem.
Yeah.
Right. And if you start with
accountability, self-accountability first, right?
Staring yourself in the mirror and saying, okay, where does this start? And in my case, it started with my childhood. And again, not to blame my parents because, you know, I've been fortunate with parents, but just recognizing like, well, what they did and how they treated me, the environment that I was in, the school that I went to, the coaches that I played for with baseball, my military time, all the experiences that I have are all a relative aspect of who I have become today.
Yes.
And then understanding like how to address all these things, and like becoming, you know, somebody that I wasn't in the corporate world was difficult and challenging to overcome. And then, you know, finally breaking free of all that and then becoming the person again and what I'm getting to is like, I had to love myself to be able to love somebody else effectively.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a factor in marriage too. I think man or woman, you have to find a way to address these things of your past, to let them go. And of course, we talk NLP. That's an episode that's out there. If you haven't listened to that, go out there and listen to it. But like addressing the wounds of the past to overcome them so that you can be the best version of yourself, so that you can properly love your family and actually enjoy and be present in those moments.
You had a couple of nuggets there that are really important, right? So the first one being is you can't fix anything unless you love and actually take care of yourself. So, you know, we talk about an important one. It's very important that you take care of yourself physically, because half of that exhaustion is because
starts there.
You know, it starts right there. Because if you take care of that, you're going to have way more abundance of energy, right? Your nutrition is going to push that energy through the roof. You're going to be healthier. You're going to be less sick. You're going to be able to be more present. The second one is exactly that: is be present. We spoke about it earlier. You know, the average American, when I say average, this is the average, spends 3.5 hours on social media. Now, why do we do it? Now you got to look at the makes of it. We're not gonna dive in. We're talking about functional adults in marriages, right? Why do you get stuck on social media? Because what happens is it's become our disconnect from reality.
Oh yeah.
So if my real reality is exceptionally difficult, so I'm dealing with work, I'm dealing with family, and I've got a lot of pressure on me, and like you say, a 2-income household is difficult. There's 2 people who have to make sure that one household runs. Yeah. You've got kids that you have to make sure that are functioning. You're raising them to be great adults. It's a lot of pressure to put on people. Add to that a struggling economy. Add to that increased prices,
financial stress,
you know, interest rates that are running through the roof. All of these things contribute to a pressure cooker of life. It can get better, it can get worse, but whether it's at a high pressure or low pressure, you are accountable and responsible to ensure that you put the mechanisms in to keep that life stable and running and moving forward, and a well-oiled engine. And I think part of that is, if you look at social media, if you're using that as your breakdown, and it's not to say social media is a bad thing, right? But now, if you're spending 3.5 hours on social media, let's assume that 1 hour of that time is at home. Let's assume, I might be wrong, might be 5 minutes. It doesn't really matter. That's 5 minutes that you could have spent at home, that you could have been present with your partner.
Right.
Now, I think that's an important factor. Me and my wife go over this a lot of times, because I run a marketing company, right? I'm consistently having to be on my phone to run through marketing. However, I can tell you that when I'm running on that phone, it takes a microsecond and one funny monkey video for me to switch over, and all of a sudden I'm running down the distraction route, right? And then all of a sudden I'm sitting there. I've gone through.
We text a lot, so we both benefit from our times of getting distracted.
You know what I mean, right? So now I'm going through this, and there's benefit to it. Like I had a very good chat with my wife about the other day. I'm like, if you think of what it provides you, right? Now it depends on what you're spending your time on social media with. Now very little known fact is you can curate your social media, right? The more of the thing you open is the more of the thing they're going to give you. So I've curated. My X account is news, right? It tells me what's happening in the world. I find it, as every statistic on earth tells you right now, is it's the best resource for news on earth, right? The second thing I do is my Instagram is where I see funny shit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So my Instagram is motivation and dogs and cats doing funny shit.
Yeah.
Why? Because it makes me laugh. It's engaging.
Which I like that.
But the problem that you have is if I get that first funny dog cat video and I start scrolling, I will literally feel like I'm blinking and I'll look up and an hour has passed. And I'm trying to be more cognizant of this because it changes your presence. Now when I've had a rough day and I've got a lot of the pressure's mounting on the day, right? We all talk about the pressure cooker. You're always in the pressure. We're talking about the pressure cooker you're running in every single day. Now you have to be cognizant of your choices of how you let that steam out. Because technically you could find things that you can do with your spouse to let that steam go. And you have to always, men especially, don't live in the silo, right? Is the minute that you put yourself in the silo, especially if the pressure's high, what happens is we're hyper-focused on what's happening. It's running in the back of the mind and we're trying to find a break in. That's where going to gym for an hour a day makes a difference because it gives you that hour where you can just let your mind go. It's why you choose to do meditation for at least 5 minutes a day, breathing exercises, oxygenate your blood. All of these tools are there so that when you are at home that you can be present. And try and find things that you can do with your spouse where you have to be present, right? Because if you're living in the modern world, right, is you got a boss who calls you, got things you got to check up. You might need to have your phone with you 24/7. You might be on call. You might be an emergency response doctor, and you have to have your phone by you, right? Sure. And it's very easy to get sucked into that. So what me and my wife do is whenever we sit and we have a bath, right? Very un-American thing, which everyone showers. We run and we sit in the bath, right? Because I can't have my phone there. We have to face each other. We have to talk. The other thing that you can do is take walks together.
That's good.
Tucker Carlson does this with his wife. And Tucker Carlson, if you have any type of preconceived about the man, really look into him as a human being because he has some really good insights, especially when he talks about his relationship with his family. And he says when him and his wife were angry, he has the best analogy. He says when they have a very difficult conversation,
they do it naked.
They get a hotel room. They get butt naked. Right, they order in, they sit there and they figure it out. And there's lots of different ways of that. Find a way that is a thing for you and your spouse. That you can sit down so you can be present because what she's looking for is your presence.
Well, and the other thing I'm hearing you say with that example is like emotional safety for them is really, really, really important. And I did not know that for whatever reason for up until probably last year. Like I just didn't understand it. I didn't get it. Even though she would even try to tell me in the past that she's like, I can't tell you anything.
But I don't think, but on that, right, and not to cut you off, I think to a large degree they understand that they want that emotional safe space. But I for the longest time is to ask her to articulate what that is.
Right. No, they can't.
And this is the thing, right? And
and me identifying this has come from my own deep work in understanding myself, but also understanding marriage. She was never able to articulate to me that I need our emotional safe space with you. She never once told me that. And could never articulate to me. She would just 100%. The best I could ever get was I'm afraid to tell you anything based on how I fear your reactions. Right, because I would give anger to any kind of hard news, like whether it was about sex, whether it was about just me and my well-being, like how my ways were. If I would get angry about something, like she would just be afraid of my reactions because I would just. And anger was an issue with me for a while. Like I mean, if I'm being honest, like, and I don't know if it's from. I think it's from childhood. It's from sports. It's from military. My therapist talked about. The pressure cooker of those things growing up and basically having rules and standards placed upon me at a very young age all the way through the military. It just became like if I didn't perform, like after my last deployment to Afghanistan, I came back obsessed with time. Like I was like literally obsessed with the time of the day because everything we did there was mission critical. It was time sensitive. And so I was constantly watching the clocks and watching where our missions were and knew everything that was happening and going on. And so that became an obsession. And my point of even bringing that up is like, I knew there was things that were off and weren't right with me, but I couldn't tell you what it was. And so what was happening is it was like I had the pressure cooker of life really getting to me and it was just coming out in the form of anger.
Well,
and so I was very reactionary often, and anger was reactions to a lot of like stressful and challenging situations that I had in my personal life,
which is the default setting of men.
Right.
Our default setting is from an age standpoint, we're testosterone driven.
Right.
When something comes off, right, that's the defense is our first aspect. If there's not something we can attack, right, I don't want to attack my wife, so when she says something,
I never laid a hand on her ever.
No,
I never physically
I'm talking emotionally.
Sure.
Right. I'm not talking physically. What I'm saying is when a human being's reaction is, especially men, is fight or flight. Right.
Yeah.
And fight is regulated, right? So if it's a situation of danger, you fight, right? Because you go in. If the situation is beyond your control and you flight, you get out of there. When it comes to your wife,
well, I'll give you an example of this. This is obviously not true, but you're fat. Your immediate reaction, fuck you, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, I work out.
Defensive,
right? You're immediately defensive on any little thing. And that's what I would do with my wife is like, it wasn't necessarily that extreme, but there would be things that would come up and I'd be like, no, I'm not. Or I would immediately get defensive. Yeah. And it's exactly right. It's fight or flight because, again, we all want to be liked. We don't want to be told where we suck. And then we struggle to receive that feedback.
From the person you love the most.
Correct.
Right.
And when you're not this like, what do you mean I'm not your knight in shining armor? Are you kidding me? I am.
It's the one person that should be able to give you this because she's not actually regulating who you are in your life. And it took me a while to figure this out as well.
Same, yeah.
You are still the love of her life. You are still the person she admires the most. You are still the most respected person. She loves you. She's with you. She's given everything to you. You've given everything to her. That doesn't change when she tells you she doesn't like something. What it does is it gives you the opportunity to try and understand. Again, that understanding of how to be that safe space, right, is, again, like you say, articulation. Women are from Mars, women are from Venus, men are from Mars, right? We are two different species trying to communicate in a way where we have fundamental different ways of expressing and receiving.
Yeah.
And for the longest time it's trying to have that understanding, and that comes from your father because, you could be the best father in the world and you're carrying over, but unless, and I've met men whose fathers have done this for them. They've taught them emotional regulation. Right now, I can't think of one conversation I had with my dad about emotional regulation ever. It was, from the advent of being a man, it was always being masculine, being manly. Don't cry, don't be weak, don't show weakness. Push forward. If someone hits you, hit back harder. These are the fundamentals, and those fundamentals are not wrong.
Right.
That doesn't make you a bad father. Those fundamentals are survival instincts. They're teaching you how to survive, but we're no longer men running in the wild.
Well, I think too, another part, like my dad has said this a lot, and I totally agree. Like each generation is trying to make the next generation better.
That's evolution right there.
And we're limited to the resources that we have in that generation. In our generation, today's world in 2025, the internet is massive. Like
our resources are exponential.
Right, and they didn't have that. They would have a newspaper and some local books from the library. Yeah. And that's how they got it. And if they didn't read, guess what? They didn't even have that. They might listen to it on the radio. Yeah. Like I always remember my dad listened to Rush Limbaugh on the radio a ton. And that, like, I don't know what else. I think sports radio was the other thing. He always listened to sports radio and AM radio, and it would always bore me to tears. But that was his source of information for a lot of stuff. And then, of course, he's a faith person. So, like, he, biblically, things like that. But it's like, today we have way more things that are being like, I think there's so many more available resources for you to dive into these exact kind of topics. Like how many people like us out there putting podcasts out there based on their own experiences because of the challenges and the struggles they've had. If I'm being honest, I'd much rather listen to guys like us or people in this circuit that have really dealt with real life scenarios and situations and how they've overcome them so they can help me. Because to me that makes a lot more sense.
Well, I think the fact that you now have more long form information and we're diving in. I think the 4 years of COVID, right, the 2020 all the way to last year, because I think the advent of, first of all, being stuck together in a place. I mean, it caused a lot of divorce. A lot of people split up, right? And then the next advent of that was people, especially in the United States, is differing political beliefs. Husband supports Trump, wife supports Biden. All of a sudden, or one's Democrat, one's Republican. All of a sudden, we can't be together, which is insane to me because it doesn't change the fact that you're both functioning human beings.
Right.
And I think it's forced us into, and I wouldn't say forced, but I think it's helped us evolve into a sense where we can sit down and try and understand. And same as you, I absorb a ton of information, trying to better understand this. My wife inundates me with information consistently to try and get me to better understand it. A lot of the information she sends to me, I'm not ready to absorb because she's sending it to me, and she's sending it to me in a format she understands.
Sure.
I don't necessarily understand it, and I cannot enact something unless I understand what I'm enacting. And a hard part of that is a lot of this is intuition, where it doesn't require understanding; it requires emotional intelligence, which has got nothing to do with logic.
Yeah.
I've got to feel where you're coming from, not see where you're coming from.
Well, this happened to me a few years back. Like, my wife was trying to do that for me, where she was trying to send me these videos of things that she was diving into, whether it be about men or what she desired. And it was overwhelming, and I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand where it was coming from. I didn't understand that it was from a place of love, and I wasn't ready to receive it. And even, I tried to receive it, but I really was having a hard time processing and understanding what it was all about. Because I'm a very simple-minded and simple-brained man. I think most of us are. Like we're not the best at deep, complex thoughts.
Men are simple creatures.
And I'm the epitome of simple. Like, I don't need a lot to be, happy. And when she would send me this stuff, like, it was like, instead of me saying, "Tell me more about that," or "Help me understand where you're coming from," I would sometimes I would just watch it and like, okay, whatever. Sometimes I wouldn't even, respond. Sometimes I would just say, "Oh, cool," and just left it at that. But my whole thing is like, I think sometimes, and that's where I'm hopeful that this podcast will help us resonate with other men that are maybe in these places that I once was, that you once were, that need to wake up and open their eyes to certain things. I think if she would have sent me something along these lines, to where it was a couple guys that are real and down to earth, I may have listened a little bit better. Yeah. But it's all about your experiences to get you to where you're ready, and that you finally are there to where you're ready to receive whatever this is.
Yeah, and it's a never-ending. And I don't even. If you asked me this a couple of years back, I'd say a struggle. Now all I'm saying is it's opening up my mind to allow me to not only better regulate my own relationship, but relationships in general.
Right.
And understanding the human condition, the human emotion, and then relaying that back to my relationship to get the most out of it. Because all we really want is we want to receive love.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's the advent of psychology which talks about the 4 different ways people receive love. There's physical, there's gifts, there's words of encouragement. I can't remember the 4th.
Acts of service, I think.
Yeah, acts of service, right?
Yeah.
Now, those 4 are great. All of us kind of fall into the category. We have 1 or 2 that we kind of lay into, right? Understanding your partner's way of receiving love, being able to have a conversation, because especially men, we get into relationships with women, and men are extremely sensitive about sex, right? Socially, we're sensitive about it because our society has invented things like penis size and are you good enough in bed? Are you long enough? Are you satisfying? These things run everywhere in society, right? And they create men to feel insecure about themselves when they shouldn't. Yeah. They make men feel emasculated. So you're going into a relationship, right? Even in marriage. And I've known people who have been married for years and they never talk about how they receive just the intimacy of sex, right? How they perceive each other. What are they like? Because what happens is, we've been taught to be embarrassed about sex. Sex is embarrassing. You shouldn't talk about it. It's taboo. And it's not. It's a natural function of human nature, right? And intimacy is a very important part of a marriage. A marriage and intimacy. As a young man, when you're first, getting into the world and getting into dating, we're inundated by lust, right? Because we have sex drive, right? We have the natural inclination that we have to reproduce. That you cannot get away from.
Yep.
But in the same breath, is once you get into a relationship, there's a switch between lust and intimacy, whereby you are receiving not just the physical, but the intimate connection with your wife.
Yes.
That intimate connection is re-established by the emotional connection that you establish with her.
Right.
And it's a cycle that you have to keep working on. Because why do you want to work on it? Because when you have that intimate sexual connection with your wife, right? One, when she gives you intimate sex, it's because she wants you. There is no better thing in the world than sex with someone who doesn't just want you physically, but emotionally as well. On the flip side of that is, that then feeds into your purpose and allows you to re-energize that energy back into her emotionally. but it takes work and constant reevaluation of yourself, because as men, again, we always slip into a silo. We try and figure everything out on ourselves, and while doing that process on the pressure, we tend to want to be the warrior and just focus one in,
right.
And then we start cutting out this wonderful human being right over here who is that support structure for us.
Oh yeah.
You know, they always talk about behind every great man is a great woman. The power of a fantastic woman in relation to how the world is structured
it's massive.
Is massive.
Yeah.
Women have a fundamentally large requirement. You know, we can talk about, you know, men build the world. All the jobs in the world that are maintained, right? If all men disappear tomorrow, all maintenance of the world disappears. Right, plumbers, construction workers, iron workers, people who repair and keep our world running is majority run by men. However, all of those men are doing those jobs and putting in those hours and putting in that effort because they are trying to keep, maintain, and enrich their lives with a relationship with a woman.
Yeah.
And because of that connection, we are both as responsible for the world we have, and trying to become that divine masculine with the divine feminine. As difficult and as hard and as we have to remap our own emotions and our own insights, is the most important thing we can do, because it's going to put us together in a way that we build this world, our children, our kids, the future generation, young men coming up now who are looking for that person in their life. If you can fundamentally find these things, all you're going to do is you're going to have what we talk about, the peace. That peace we're looking for. The only person who can give you that peace in your life is a man, right? Is a good woman in your life. From a natural state. It's not to say that you have to get married. It's not to say that being single is bad.
I agree with what you're saying.
But from a natural standpoint, that is what we're purposefully pushed to do. Yeah. We're purposely pushed to reproduce, to find the person that we can have children with. We then want to have them in our lives. And now what happens is my purpose is to maintain that life and then enrich that life, which we do together. So a good man is always followed by a good woman, but that advent of those two is a constant workload, right? I don't even want to call it work. It's a constant growth that you both have to engage in to understand each other fundamentally, so that you grow together as one, not as two. Because once you get married, once you get into that relationship, you actually become one entity, two individuals acting as one entity in growth.
Yeah, but I think what's easily, there's a few things I want to go back to, but like with that point is you're not going to give 50-50. You're both giving 100, and it's not always giving 100 at the same time, and that's one of the struggles, right? Like, is that you find yourself forgetting that you're on the same team. And it becomes like a chess match, like me versus them, and it's anything but that. You're a team, right? You're both aligned, and you've got to find ways to both contribute at the same time. And if one's not there, we'll give a little more to try to get that other one there. But back to the sex.
It's that, right?
It is.
It's lifting each other up. One goes down, you lift each other, you're there.
Back to the sex thing. I grew up with sex being taboo. Okay, sex was not a subject that was talked about. Do you remember the show Baywatch? Mm-hmm. Like, I grew up in a household where when they'd have their little spoofs of, like, we would watch Baywatch because of the lifeguarding stuff, but when they'd have the spoofs with the sexy women dancing around in lingerie or bikinis or whatever they did, we'd have to change the channel, right? We would. You laugh? It's reality. Like, Sam laughs about that too. It's funny, but at the end of the day, that's the household I grew up in. Sex, my parents never had a sex conversation with me. Don't know why. Maybe it was just too awkward. I don't really know. The church and school that I went to up until high school, I went to a public school, but the private school that I went to, it was taboo. It wasn't talked about. You were just told abstain. Don't ever have it before marriage because it's a sin. It's wrong.
So no one ever talks about what you do when you get married.
Correct. Right? And then even when you get married, they're like, okay, all right, sex is a beautiful thing between a man and a woman, and then like, how? And like, I remember some marriage advice I got actually from my mom. I love her, but she's like, hey, let me give you some advice. Keep the bedroom hot. And I'm like, oh God, Mom, like, what is that? That's gross. Here, my mom say that. But even that, you go, okay, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, there's and I wouldn't expect a parent. It's a very difficult conversation to have with a child.
Yeah, totally. But I think in my mind, right, and this is based on what I've experienced. Like, I'm not going to sit here and want to like dive into my kid's sex life, but I'm not going to be afraid. Just kind of pick it up where we were. The sex from my parents were told, like, basically, like, keep your bedroom hot, but I didn't really understand what that meant. And from my perspective, I was like, okay, well, how do I be a good lover for my wife? Well, in my mind, it was just, well, if I get her off, I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
There's so much more to that, and unfortunately, there's not enough discussion around, like, what intimacy truly is. Men have a tendency to resort to porn to figure things out, and that's anything but what sex actually is supposed to be.
It's the fakest form of it.
Yeah, and so, you just go into it, and then if you have two people that aren't communicating to each other and they struggle to communicate about what's difficult, and we talked earlier about emotional safe space, and you don't create that safe space to be told, like, hey, you're not a very good lover, dude.
Yeah, and that's a difficult thing for a guy to hear, right? Yeah. Because this is the person that you're married to, and they they don't want to disappoint you. Look at it from a woman's perspective, right? This is the strong man in my life that I love with everything I have. I don't want to disappoint him. So sometimes for them, especially with that safe space that doesn't exist, right? It's easier just to tell you everything's fine, right? And kind of grin and bear it, which we do on opposite ends in different aspects.
Well, people cope, and I know that's something I had to find out the hard way. I was like they tend to just cope with their realities because what else can they do? And they knew they loved you, and they knew they wanted kids with you, and so they just coped with it, and they were afraid to tell me what was going on. Then I also think about this, like this to me, and we were talking fitness here. This is something I want to circle back to too, because it's really relative in this area. For any man that's listening to this and you're fat and out of shape, I promise you your wife doesn't like it. Yeah. She just doesn't, right? And so she may not tell you that, but she doesn't like it.
She loves you. She wants you to be happy.
And convinces that she's happy with a dad bod, but she's not.
Yeah.
Okay? At the end of the day, look at the person that you were when she married you. Yeah. You were probably younger, like a lot less fat, or in shape and great, you look good, whatever the story. And in my case, like, because I just let life take over and let myself to, put 50 pounds on, I wasn't working out, and I became somebody that even myself looking in the mirror was just like, dude, like this is bullshit. This has got to change. Well, guess what? She's fucking the fat guy, right? And at the end of the day, like, she doesn't want to fuck the fat guy. She wants somebody that she actually looks at and admires. And then, so if you add in, all right, you let yourself go, and then you're an angry person. You're bringing anger into the home. And you become somebody that's just not a very desired person, like, and you're not getting laid. Like, are you surprised? I mean, and I'm talking to myself. I mean, I hate to admit that out loud on a podcast, but if it helps somebody else not go through the same thing that I've gone through, like, at the end of the day, like, you have to accept responsibility for who you've become. And I've done that, and I'm putting in the work. I continue to put in the work, and nothing's going to change in that regard. But putting your health as a priority is going to feed so much of these other things. It's so much importance.
I want to dive into your health, right, and putting that as a priority. And this is a discussion that I have with my wife often, right, it's not about looking a certain way. And I want people to understand, right? It's not that your wife expects you to look like the fitness model in a magazine, right? Because if you're going to put yourself on that, and women often put themselves on the opposite end on that spectrum, that is not what anybody in a relationship is looking for, right? So I found a way that I try and explain this, and I hope this can resonate with people. The only time that I will ever be upset if my wife is out of shape is when she doesn't care enough about herself to look after herself, right? Because we are human beings. We are going to go through different phases of life. Some of that might be health issues that you deal with, chronic health issues. You may have portions in your life, women, when they go through childbirth, it changes how their hormones work. Men go through at different stages as they age. It's not about being a fitness model your whole married life. For my wife, how I explain it to her is, when you stop caring, I'll stop caring.
Yeah.
As long as you are always actively taking steps to be the healthiest, best version of yourself. How that version looks, I actually do not care.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's more about the energy that you put out than how you look.
Right.
If your husband, right, he might be a guy who from the advent, if I'm comparing him to a fitness model in a magazine, you could say he's out of shape. However, he's working out, he looks after his health, he makes sure he eats healthy, and he's genetically, he's a person who carries a couple of pounds. He's good, she's good, she loves you. It's the energy you exude by actually caring enough about yourself to take steps to be healthy, as you said. Totally. And I want people to take the physical aspect out. If you train, if you exercise and you eat health, I guarantee you're probably going to look good, right? Does that mean that you're going to be able to be the next Sports Illustrated model? No, right? Because we're not comparing genetics here. Everybody's different. What we're saying is, if you consistently take active steps to be healthy and the best version of yourself, your spouse will appreciate every step you take.
She's not going to be upset with you because you're in shape and healthy.
Yes.
Like, she's just not, and honestly, like, your kids too, like, your kids are watching you. And something that just happened yesterday was, we train in Muay Thai. We like to train, and we have a heavy bag at home. My son likes to fight, and he likes to do stuff. And so he's like, "Hey, Daddy, can you put the heavy bag up?" I'm like, "Sure." So I go in the garage, and I haven't put the heavy bag up for him in a little bit. I got up on a little step stool, and I hang it from the ceiling, and I literally curled the heavy bag and held it in place and hung it. And before, I'd have to, like, bear hug the thing and hold it up. And I was like, holy crap, I literally just curled this thing and hung this thing up like it was nothing. I think when it comes to, like, a man and your health and well-being, and when we're talking marriage and relationships here, or we're talking sex, are you somebody that she desires still today? And that's what I think you should be really striving to build. And the one thing I would tell anybody, like, a wife's love is not unconditional. The only love that's unconditional, and this is debatable too, is a mother's love. But my point is, like, are you somebody that she still wants to be with? Are you a person that she's attracted to, not only physically, but based on the way you act, the way you lead yourself, the way you lead your family, the things that you do each and every day? Being a constant learner, being, there's so many daily habits to incorporate. Like, I think about, like, for me, one of my daily habits is just reading 10 pages a day to just better myself, right? I read 10 pages from something, making sure I follow a meal plan, making sure that I'm drinking my water, making sure that I'm going to the gym, making sure I'm doing things, making sure I'm being happy, just a generally happy person, right? Just trying to create these daily habits, because ultimately, and I didn't know this, I had to learn the hard way. It's an excuse to say I didn't know this. I just didn't realize that I needed to do this. When you get married, the work doesn't stop, the work begins, right? And if you don't put the work in your marriage, you're going to get that benefit from that. Like, you're going to find where you find yourself, and it's not going to be good. And, it's not going to just happen to be a good, happy-go-lucky marriage. It's going to take effort from you to figure out what to do to overcome and fix these scenarios and problems. So the sooner you start, the better. I know that's a lot. We could really keep going down a rabbit hole, but
I'd add to that, because what you mentioned there was all the steps you took of self-improvement, which is the first step of having a better relationship. Love yourself to love someone else more, right? And then the second one is in your relationship, right? Don't be afraid to play. Don't be afraid to laugh. Try and laugh.
I struggled with that.
Like, laughing, man. Like, there's nothing better than laughing out of your stomach with your wife.
Yeah, I struggled with that.
Find ways to play. Be playful. Be present. Be playful. Be happy. Laugh. Enjoy. Love.
I love what you said though. Like, you mentioned about just, like, learning, like, having fun, playing, just being playful. That's a big deal. Belly laughing, like, stand-up comedy is a good like tool for that. Like, watching some of that or going to shows. Don't forget how to play. Like, one of the things that I struggled with for a long time, real quick, I'll say this. Like, because of my deployments and stuff, I struggle with getting startled and I would get angry about it. Now that I've addressed my anger, my issues and stuff like that, we have fun scaring each other now. Just playfully having fun like that. Just messing around.
That's the stuff, man. Like, try and find the inner child in you.
Totally.
And that'll help her find hers, and express that and enjoy each other, and always be eternally young, playful and fun with each other. Like, listen, man, no one likes a grumpy old fuck.
Accept them for who they are. I was terrible at that. Like, terrible. Like, I would look at them and they are who they are, right? You're not going to necessarily change the person, but embrace them for who they are. And I was terrible at just like, well, why would you do that? Why would you act that way? Because it wasn't what I would do, right?
Yeah, you were enacting what you perceive to be how you should correct instead of just embracing who they are.
And that's wrong, right? You have to, if you don't like who the person is, then like, why did you marry that person? So why are you trying to change them, right? And I don't think it's like I would lay down my life for my wife and kids. But it's not about that. It's the idea that, well, I wouldn't do that, so why are you doing it? You're embarrassing me. Well, it's because something I would do. If I did something like that, it would embarrass me. It's not something I would do, but that's not their story. She's not you. And she's not me, so embrace her and celebrate her. And I just did not do a good job at that.
Yeah. And when you do, you'll find an appreciation for the person you have on a level you cannot imagine.
Totally. So, and it's freeing, you know.
It is.
So leave it there.
I think that's a good point. So let's leave that one there, sir.
Good deal.